I don't remember the transition of going from God's table and temple into heaven, but I remember being in heaven, and it was amazing. And it is so unlike what I was being taught in the Catholic Church growing up. I have said numerous times, heaven is like the bar scene in Star Wars. They're not all human. And that would be ridiculous to say that, yeah, we're the only living species, throughout the universe. No, every planet's got living beings on it. And I've seen them, when I was in heaven. So that was interesting. I remember at another point, I was walking down the sidewalk, and I remember I've been a Queen fan, okay, since age 11. And I'm looking down at the sidewalk, and I look up, and it's Freddie Mercury. And he says, "Well, do you want to have some fun?" And I said, "Yes." And he turns me around to walk with him. And we wound up going to this outdoor arena.
She's back. My guest today is Megan Brown, who had an incredible, detailed 5-day in heaven near-death experience. And we are going to discuss part 2 because there was so much detail to her part 1. We didn't have enough time. We ran out of time. So we have scheduled this day to go into the second part of her near-death experience, which goes into the heavenly realm, outside of this table where she met the representation from every religion. So if you have not watched part 1, you might want to head over here and watch part 1 first. But I promise you, this is going to be an amazing conversation. You're going to hear things you probably have never heard before in near-death experiences. So Megan, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Lori, it is so good to see you again. Thank you for having me.
I am so grateful because since we did our first interview, we actually got to meet in person.
I know. I was so excited. And you got to see that my friend Shakina, who has also had 3 NDEs, we bring about love in our community. This is what we want to do. And we want to connect people to heaven. And so this is why we collaborate and do what we do.
It was so much fun. So Megan lives in Sedona. I'm about 90 minutes outside of Sedona. I love to go there. And she had a group of people, and they did energy healing with sound and frequency and vibration. And then they did a reading for different people in the room. And it was just a really cool vibe, a cool community. And I think you're doing these once a month.
Yes, once a month.
So you can head, I'll put Megan's information for her website in the show notes, but you can head over there and get all the details about when her next one is. I'm not going to say when they are because these videos live in perpetuity. So it's by the time you probably are listening, it's already been here and gone, but go check out what she's doing because it was really, really interesting. I had a great time, and I will definitely be going back and doing this again. So thank you. That was fun. And I got something else. I said in the first interview that your near-death experience was so detailed that I was actually going to buy your book. And I did. I bought it, and you wrote a nice little dedication, and I started reading it already. I have not gotten as far as where we're going to get to part 2. So this is going to be new for me also. But I wanted to just kind of get your feedback because this video took off on my channel, Megan. It took off.
Well, I think I'm really glad. And I'll say I'm really glad because I think people, no matter where they're at and what they believe, they need to hear something else, right? And really, my whole goal and my mission now, since my NDE, the last one, is about love, spreading love. That's it. But in the meantime, I've got to tell the stories. And I believe that I was given so much information because I didn't believe in them to begin with. I had no expectations of death. You get buried, whatever, cremated, and then you're done. That's not the case. Oh no, you go on living. And so um, it's interesting because they had me meet with so many souls. And I think it was to help bring me, I mean, I think a lot of things about it, but we don't have time for a lot of things. But I think it was about bringing me to an awareness of that each of these souls was a philosopher. So when I met with Buddha, when I met with Jesus, when I met with Abraham Lincoln, I had to meet with Abraham Lincoln. When I met with who, oh gosh, oh, Gaius Julius Caesar. So, I mean, these are souls that you'd go, huh? And people have said, he was brutal. Gaius Julius Caesar was this and that. And it's like, okay, that's what history has been rewritten, okay, about. And what people are not taking into account is how far history has been rewritten. And
Hmm.
there was so I can go in one of two directions here right now, but I'll stick with the no, he was not brutal. He created democracy, as a matter of fact. He also created the veto power, and he didn't get credit for it. His wife was also Cleopatra. There's a whole story on it in my book. And it's like, wait, no, how'd that? And they were both killed. And Mark Antony, that was his very close friend. And Mark Antony's wife, Octavia, all of them were murdered one night after Caesar won again. They were all smothered. And so it was just so profound. The stories that I heard, and it's like Abraham Lincoln, his first wife was black. And this is when he was a mayor in Tennessee in the 1800s. And then she was murdered by the KKK. And then he's like, how do I, how he couldn't tell anybody. He couldn't tell anybody that his wife was black. He couldn't tell anybody what he was going through. So he thought, oh, okay, I'll run for president and I will change things. And that's exactly what he did. So
Wow.
the reason that these souls have given me a different story is because they want their truth to come forward. They want their truth to come forward. And I thought, okay, this is really powerful. This is a lot of information, but it
Yeah.
has to come out.
Well, the other part I think that's significant to mention is that whatever you think or believe of how a person is on earth is not the way that we are on the other side. On the other side, on a soul level, we are the embodiment of love. We come here to experience love, but on the other side, we are love. And that can't be taken away no matter what somebody did on the earthly planet that is considered good or bad or evil. It doesn't take away and remove that when you are not in the human incarnation and you are on the other side as a soul, that you are love. And since everything is connected, you can't take love from one soul and say, well, that person did these things and so they're not love, because you can't remove something, a partial something from the whole.
Yeah, it's true. Because we are a creation of love's perfection. That's who we are. Love's perfection. And
Wow, well, that's beautiful.
yeah, and what we do with it is our choice, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, but when we get to
So,
the other side, there's no pressure there because
mm,
it's a vibration. When you get to heaven, it's not like Earth at all. Now, that's not saying that Earth cannot become like heaven, because we can, but we need to understand what love is and the structure of love. And we don't understand it here. So,
and I don't know if it's even conceivable to fully understand it with the human avatar that we are and forgetting the connection to the other side. But you obviously came back with a mission to try to do exactly that.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as the years keep going and I'm getting older, as from when it happened, this NDE, I have, and I watch my son grow up, and I'm like, I'm just having different feelings, and I'm able to appreciate the messages even more on different levels, you know? So I think that's important to keep in mind as well for anybody, and by the way, every NDEer, I would love for everybody to just feel normal. I would love for this type of talk to be completely normalized here on this planet. So rather than
Meaning like mainstream,
totally,
mainstream. Yeah.
yeah, mainstream, because this is what needs to become mainstream. So I was joking with somebody, I don't remember who recently, but we were talking about like, when do you think people are going to get it? Like all of these people, there's just like this influx of NDEs that are happening. And I'm like thinking, I go, well, yeah, because heaven's going, all right, we'll just bring a whole bunch more to love and let's see what they do with that information. And some are too scared, as I have seen in at the IANDS that I attended last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want to be ostracized from their families or their friends and their community, and it depends on what part of the world they're from. There was a woman from Ireland, and I thought, wow, okay, really Irish Catholic, the whole thing, and
Right.
didn't want to talk about anything. So I just want everybody to feel comfortable with it and know that if love was not so important to be talked about, they wouldn't be pulling more people in for NDEs. Heaven would.
That's a great point. And I also feel it's super vulnerable to share these experiences. Like the comments that people make sometimes are not kind. Sometimes they are not what you want to have to address. And I've watched some of the comments on this video, and I've also watched your responses, Megan, and I'm so impressed at how every time, no matter what anybody has said about your experience that you are sharing vulnerably, you always respond to them in love. So thank you for doing that, because you're setting the example. You're talking the talk and you're walking the walk.
I knew that I would be, I knew that because God and all of these souls in heaven that I met with warned me, you're going to be meeting people who are not going to agree. And I've met them, or not literally, but like online, and they'll say things. And I think, all right, well, that's fine. I don't work for you, and I'm not here to impress anybody. I'm here working for heaven. And that's how I look at it. Like when I go back again, I don't want God to go, so Megan, why didn't you talk about? And I'd be like, no, oh my God, I don't want to reincarnate. Tough. Nope, you gotta go back. So I don't want to do that. I just want to get it all right in this last time around.
Okay, well, let's talk about part two then.
Yeah.
So when we left off, you were at the table made of 33 and a third percent gold with all of these evolved beings that you had to walk around the table and get a message from each one of them, and God addressed you. And then when all of that was done, what happened next?
Well, I remember at one point, I guess I told you about my conversation with God. Forgive me, I can't remember. But like when I was standing next to God at his table and the thing about the car, sitting in the car with me. Did I?
I think so. Yes, 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 you did.
So then at one point, after all of the conversations around the table, there was this big wooden door. And I swear it had to be like 10 feet tall. It was huge, huge. And I knew that if I went through that door, that means I died. So I would just go into heaven. And so I was touching the wooden door because everything else was gold, except this was like the earth thing. So that's what it represented to me in that moment. And so I'm touching it and I looked back at God and everybody at the table and I said, you mean if I go through this door, I I don't have to go back? And they all smiled at me and said, yes. whether it be shaking their head or saying yes. And I thought, wow. And then I went, no, the Catholic guilt's kicking in right now. After all of the time that you guys have spent with me and all of this preparation that you've given me, I can't not go back, in other words. So I chose to come back. But then I remember I was in heaven, and I don't remember the transition of going from God's table in temple into heaven. But I remember being in heaven, and it was amazing. It was amazing. And it is so unlike what I was being taught in the Catholic Church growing up. Um, I have said numerous times, heaven is like the bar scene in Star Wars. And somebody was very upset about me saying that, but I'm not trying to upset anyone. I'm trying to describe how you see others while you're in heaven. They're not all human. And that would be redunculous to say that, yeah, we're the only living species, throughout the universe. No, every planet's got living beings on it. And I've seen them, when I was in heaven. So um, that was interesting. I remember at another point, I was walking down the sidewalk, and I remember I've been a Queen fan, okay, since age 11. And I'm looking down at the sidewalk, and I look up, and it's Freddie Mercury. And I thought, oh my God. I turned into this like fangirl. I go, "You're Freddie Mercury," you know? And he goes, "Yeah." And he's a very gentle soul. He was very soft spoken, funny, very funny. But he was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "So how are you?" And I said, "Oh my God, I'm in kidney failure right now. I'm in so much pain." And I start describing the whole thing. And he says, "Well, do you want to have some fun?" And I said, "Yes." And he turns me around to walk with him. So he turned the other way. I was walking with him in his direction. He turned. And we wound up going to this outdoor arena. And I don't remember him leaving me, how he left me, but he was gone. And then I'm with all of these souls. And we're all wearing our white togas, and whatever stole, it indicated like if you're a visitor, if you're going to be staying, if you're from Earth, Neptune. I mean, you don't know who you're dancing with. So, and I say dancing because the concert started, and it was so incredible. And it opened with Billy Barty and Spike Jones. And it was so much fun. And I'd met Billy Barty as a kid. And then I met him again when I was pregnant with my son. And then here I am seeing him in heaven. And I'm like, no way. This is so cool. So then after them was Ella Fitzgerald and Cole Porter. And then after them was Queen, the band that they put together, and Freddie Mercury on piano, of course, and singing. And then Terry Kath was on guitar. You knew who he was. Okay.
From Chicago, like one of my all-time favorite bands. Like my mind just about popped out of my head because the person that I know who is connected to him, her birthday is today. She's going to be blown away. Oh my God, this is nuts. Of course you would say that.
Is it his daughter by any chance that you're connected? Oh, I'll tell you a story later. Anyway, so Terry Kath, Rick James, Marvin Gaye, and Buddy Rich were a part of the band of Queen. I remember dancing, and I remember seeing there was this female who was to my left, and her hair was in a bun, and we were all smiles. Like everybody was elated to just express themselves and just have fun. So after the concert was over, I wind up back in my tent because I was told I had to stay in this purple tent, and it was this deep purple color. And the exterior was purple, but the inside was not purple. It was like kind of a creamy white. And I remember sitting at this huge table in my tent. It was a big tent, and we were all sitting in there. And I had the 27 archangels that met me, at God's table. They were sitting in here again. And Freddie Mercury was sitting directly across from me, and seated to his left, my right, was Terry Kath, and then it was Rick James, Marvin Gaye, and all these. Okay, so I mean, we were just having so much fun. And as it turns out, Freddie and I were married in a previous life together. Terry Kath and I were siblings in another life. Rick James and Marvin Gaye and I, we were all married in previous lives together. So we had like connected in these previous lives. But here they were coming to me because they knew that, like, I guess God knew ultimately that this is what had to happen. I could handle this conversation. And I wasn't being fangirl with any of them, by the way. So it was just Freddie Mercury. But there were so many messages that were given during this period of time. But before we get to that, we were having fun, we were laughing, and the cherubs were bringing in red wine. And they were filling our glasses, our wine glasses, and the decanters with red wine. And there was a gold basket on the table, baskets, I should say, of bread. Okay, this is heaven. I'm getting drunk with all of these souls, and it's okay. I mean, but what's so funny is I didn't even think about it then. The whole Catholic thing, you're breaking bread and wine, wine and bread, right? So the Catholic Church, do you accept the body of Christ? Right. Okay. So I didn't think about that back then, but all of a sudden Prophet Muhammad walked in, and every one of us stopped talking, and we all stood up and, like, bowed, and he indicated with his hands to sit down, and he was very serious. He had a very serious demeanor. And he didn't waste any time. There was no fluff. He looked directly in my eyes, and he started just telling me, I want you to go back. He was giving me orders. I want you to go back, tell the world that I pray for the world. I'm always there for the Middle East. Uh, I need everybody to know that there is no killing allowed. I mean, he said some things that are, and I'm looking at him going, he's talking to me. Why are you? But I'm listening, and he just gave more and more instruction. And so he said, I want everybody to know that peace is what it needs to be, basically was his message. And then he looked at me and he said, I must go now. And then he looked at me and he goes, put the book out. Okay. So God told me that. So many souls in heaven told me that. Prophet Muhammad said this to me. So he left, and all of us, it was like we were sobered up in that moment, and we got very serious. And Marvin Gaye broke the ice, and he said, Megan, you have to go back and tell everybody what happened, how we fought to be ourselves. And because we were Black, we were being beaten. The civil rights movement was awful. Ella Fitzgerald was telling me how she was involved in it. And I was like, I got tears. I was crying, hearing the stories from these souls. And it was so incredibly powerful. And I thought, oh my gosh. And then Buddy Rich didn't talk at all until the very end. He said something like he agreed, but he was he didn't talk. But Billy Barty started talking, and he shared that it was very difficult for him to be laughed at as a child in the 1920s, walking with his parents, and people laughing and saying, oh, you should put him in a circus. And oh, look at the little man. And he said, it hurt. And I was hurt. And then guess who started the Little People's Foundation in the 1960s? It was Billy Barty. He's the one who got everybody equal pay, because you're a little person doesn't mean that you're going to get thrown around. So oh my God, that was just so monumental in that moment. But I was crying. And then Freddie Mercury said, I would like you to tell people how difficult it was for me to transition from being quote unquote heterosexual to homosexual in the height of my career. That was not easy. And so what they were sharing with me was such bravery, absolute bravery. And the reason I believe that they shared it with me, I can understand now. And the reasoning gets kind of like locked in with what I'm going to share with you next. So there's more I could go to, but this one's really important. So Jesus sees me in heaven and I'm walking around and he comes up to me and he says, "Can we talk for a moment?" And I said, "Yes." And so he says, what is it that you're still struggling with?" And I said, "I struggle with the fact that I was sexually abused as a child. I was in this horrible car accident as a kid. My best friend and her mother died. I had to, do all this. And then I was raped, and then I had the abortion, and then I'm an atheist. And then I go, but I'm looking at him. I go, where were the, Catholic police for me? Why wasn't anybody protecting me? I mean, my own parents weren't even, right? So he looked at me and he says, "Well, Megan," he said, "what if I were to tell you that every experience you've had in your life is a child within you? What would you do to those children?" And without hesitation, I said, "Evict them immediately." And he goes, "Ah." I said, "They're old enough. They can take care of themselves now and they can move out." And he says, "Ah, okay, well, we have more talking to do." So I wasn't allowed to remember this part, but he goes on for a while and he starts explaining things to me further. And then he looks at me and he says, "Okay, Megan, I'm going to ask you again. What are you going to do to the children that are inside of you that are all from the experiences that you've had in life?" And he says, "But keep in mind, every child is you." And in that moment, Lori, that was like, I mean, it was like, hit me so deeply. And I've never forgotten the impact that made with me. And I recognized, wow, I recognized that I was behaving like my mother in saying that I would evict him immediately. And that, they could go take care of themselves because that's how my parents treated me. Okay, get out. I mean, it was okay, whatever. And whatever, love around him. But it was so profound because then I looked at Jesus and I said, he says, "What would you do to those children?" And I said, "I would acknowledge them. I would listen to them. I would nurture them, and I would love them." And he said, "Wow, that's beautiful." And he said, "If you were to name your children, what would you name them?" And I was so embarrassed at this point in front of him because I felt like I should have known better than to say a victim. So I looked down at the ground and I remember tears were welling up in my eyes. And I looked back up at Jesus and I said, "I would name them all love." And he said, "Really?" He said, "Why would you name them love?" And I said, "Because it's love that gave them to me. Like every experience was love. I was granted what I chose with God." And I haven't really talked about it like this, but getting back to God, he told me that I chose everything in this life, everything. And I'm like, what was I thinking? And he said, "You didn't want to reincarnate." And so that's when I learned about reincarnation back at the beginning. But so now with that wisdom that I learned from Jesus, I've taken that in my life and I look at every situation and I look at every person and I I think, wow, okay, well, those who are being, perhaps rude or whatever they're acting out because they were never acknowledged for who they are. They weren't listened to, they weren't nurtured properly, and they weren't loved properly. So that's my assessment on humanity from, basically what I shared with Jesus. And I'll stop right there in case you have any questions because I just said a lot.
I do. So you mentioned that's what I learned about incarnation, and then you stopped. Tell us what you learned about incarnation, like coming back, reincarnation.
Yeah. So back when I found out that, when God first said to me, and about that abortion, and then I thought I was going to be ejected to hell. That's when I learned that my son came back to me, because I had a dream when I was pregnant. The first time I had a dream that I was pregnant with a boy, and I always wanted a boy because I only had three brothers and I only knew boys and I was the eldest, right? So I always wanted a little boy, but I didn't want it in that manner. I didn't want that. And so it kind of, he looked at me and said, but he's waiting for you now back on earth. And that's when I was like, what? For the first time, it was, he connected the dots for me. Yeah, he reincarnated.
So what you're saying is that even though you had an abortion, the soul who would have come came later.
Yes.
I'm so glad you're sharing this, because Megan, you're not the first person to say that, to not the first person to uncover this in a near-death experience.
I didn't know that. I'm glad.
And sometimes when it's been told, it hasn't necessarily been with abortion, it's been with miscarriage as well. And there was one woman who was sharing how upset she was at this miscarriage and how she was grieving it as a loss of this child. And then in her near-death experience was shown that the soul was never lost. It just came back again. There was also another girl, this isn't somebody I interviewed, but I remember the story from a long time ago, who had lost a sister very, very close to her, and then later learned that the sister's soul came back as her daughter, right, in the same family. So I think that because souls are not what we think they are, we can be everything and anything. It's not a stretch. It's not difficult. It's not any hardship on the other side to just re-evaluate and change and remaneuver and become something else. And I think this goes with our pets as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I've had dreams of my pets, um, these dogs that I absolutely love. And they've come to me in the past couple of years, both of them. And I'm like, oh, I saw China last night. I saw a shadow last night. It's like, these are my dogs. So they do come to you. But, speaking of the soul and that woman, the miscarriage, and they grieve, um, I have a feeling about that, because I channel, and I've channeled for women who they don't come in telling me anything. I don't want to know anything about anybody when I do it. I just want to hear what heaven has to say. And there have been women who, a child comes in and I say, oh, your daughter's here. I don't have a child. Oh, well, then did you have an abortion or a miscarriage? And then they reveal, yes. Okay. Well, and then some cry, and then I'm telling them, no, they're not angry with you. They knew that you may do that. They're not angry. And please, heaven wants you to know that you made a choice. And in making the choice, you were giving yourself, consciously or unconsciously, you were giving yourself the opportunity to grow soulfully and expand soulfully. So I think it's more unconscious, because when when you talk about a woman who's had a miscarriage and who grieves in that way, it's like it was for her to grow through something that she was connecting to in her previous life. And the child will come back. The child will come back. But yeah, that's my philosophy on it now. Having
And I think it's so comforting for everybody who's watching, who had to endure the trauma of an experience like that, to know that nothing is lost.
No, nothing's lost.
Because
Nothing.
it's all love on the other side. Okay, that's amazing. All right, well, please continue with wherever you want to go next with this.
Okay, so I was in my head thinking, okay, which way do I go? I don't even know how much time I have left. Okay, so I will go to another moment when Jesus Jesus and I were together, and we were sitting on the floor, and we had to watch a world review, but it was like my life review. So it was like on the screen. And I remember the first video that we watched. I'll call it a video because it was, I mean, I was watching life happen on TV, right? And it was the Native Americans in the 1100s being in the United States. They were the only people here. They were the only souls here. There were no tribes back then in the 1100s. I don't care what history has written or rewritten, and I don't know what they have written or rewritten. I'm just telling you what I saw from heaven sitting next to Jesus. So I watched that. The Europeans came in and decided they wanted the land. So they came in, they slaughtered the Native Americans, and I still can't get out of my head. There was a chief on horseback, and he was trying to protect his family and his like tribe, you know, his community, and he was decapitated. And I just, I was crying and just crying and watching the horrific things that were happening to these people, and they were disbanding out of fear, and the tribes came in later, like the titles that they would call themselves, for protection and to know where each was in a part of the United States. It's like I don't remember all of that, right? I just remember these things about it. But it was the trajectory of who and what was going on in the US changed for good. It was done. It was completely altered. Then the next part of the world review that I had to watch was the Holocaust and World War II. And I remember watching just these horrific. I mean, I'm just, it's still so incredibly, I don't, there are no words for the pain that I witnessed and the horrors that I witnessed there in heaven. And I think to myself, wow, wow. I just cried. And we all know what happened, right? And then the next part of the world review that I had to watch was the civil rights movement. So remember, I'd already met, you know, Marvin Gaye and Rick James and all of them, but here I am watching what was happening in the civil rights movement. And again, I'm crying because of a skin hue. People are being murdered, hung, rejected, ostracized. Are you kidding me? And do you know how many of those people called themselves Christian or had, you know, godly in some way? You've got to be kidding me. I'm getting chills right now at how angry I was watching this. There were so many emotions that were going through me when I was watching this. Besides crying, I was angry. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing, and no one was doing anything. Yeah, okay, there were some, and there were the soldiers. Okay, I'm not minimizing those who did what they did to protect countries. I'm not minimizing anybody's job here. What I'm saying is, what I also witnessed were the people that didn't do anything and that could have. And in the civil rights movement, okay, that was like a cookie cutter time. You know, you were just coming out of World War II, right? So like 40s, and then you know, you got the 50s, and here's the 60s, because that's pretty fresh. So like everybody's trying to live and not perhaps I don't know, get involved in anything that's whatever that doesn't directly affect them, as God would say. But um it was just it was beyond horrific to watch that. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. And there is no excuse for that behavior. So all of a sudden I see Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and I'm watching the marches and the speech, you know, and all of these things that he did. And the night where he goes up the steps to the motel room where he was staying, and I watched him get assassinated. And immediately I threw my hands up over my mouth and I said, oh my God, we've murdered you twice. And I looked at Jesus because that was the second coming of Christ. And I don't know. I mean, I've talked about this, but I don't know how often. And I think now I'm like, Megan, just say it all. Just say it all. Because there's a reason God showed me and told me I had to tell everything. There's a reason. And I didn't say everything in my first book. And I didn't because I didn't know how. I didn't know how to talk about my abortion. I didn't know how. I didn't know how to not feel like, what people's judgment would be of me having an abortion. I remember what it was like walking into the abortion clinic and, walking through the parking lot and seeing all of that and witnessing that, experiencing that, and the shame, that and I'm thinking I was raped. Why? Wait, what? You have no idea what my story is here, right? So I still carried that around. So you see, I've been working on stuff. It I'm, from that near death experience, I'm forever changed. But to process it all and to step into the strength of going, yeah, just say it. Look, it doesn't matter. Everybody's got an opinion anyway. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I know that I'm answering to God in the end, and He told me to talk about it, so I'm talking about it. But then, when I told Jesus how angry I was after I said, oh my God, we've murdered you twice. I said, I'm so angry. And He looked at me very calmly and He said, how do you think I feel? Just matter of factly. Well, then I had to go in and meet with God again. God met with me a number of times while I was in this NDE. And it was so intimidating every time because it's God. And so He looked at me and He asked me, what did you learn watching these life reviews? And I shared with him what I felt, and I shared with him what I watched. And he said, and what are you going to do about it? And I said, what do you mean? What am I going to do about it? It's already been done. I said, there's nothing I can do. And he looked at me and he said, that's the problem with humanity. They do not do anything unless they're directly affected. And that was all he said to my response to him. I answered his question honestly. I didn't think that I could do anything. I felt incapable. I felt powerless. I felt I'm just a regular person. Who's going to listen to this? Who's going to hear me and my story? What do you want me to do? But I was so wrong, because now with what I'm seeing going on in our world, I'm like, holy shit. I've got to start talking about everything. Everything. And I've got to let people know that this isn't about, coming on and just talking about a near death experience, which I'm happy to do, and give people like, hope that there's an afterlife and that there's really love waiting for them, because I didn't think that that was there. So, I mean, I wish that for people, and whatever that they need to hear from my experience, I pray that they receive it in the moment that they hear it. I want to help someone. That's what I want to do. And all of these messages that were given to me, they aren't just for me, they're for everybody. And I didn't know that, like, after it happened to me. I didn't compute that yet, but I compute it now. And, I want people, to think of a near death experience as like, oh, you got a message of love too. How interesting. And so I believe we are all here to keep, it's like heaven's pulling us all in, and they're going, oh, here, it's all about love. You're all going to feel love. You're all going to get love. So just talk amongst yourselves, because they can't tell us what to do. They can only give us experiences, and we get the experiences, I believe, that we need. And they know like what groups each of us is working with, where we live, what our backgrounds are. They know everything. So they give us what we can handle. I mean, that's how I look at it now, but
I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. I mean, how else can you look at it? Megan, there's so much to this. And I think the first question I have for you is, before this happened, you're an atheist. You don't have, you have the Catholic upbringing like you shared, but you're not in any type of a religious context. And you come back not only meeting God, but also being in heaven and all these other entities that have a religious connection to them. What in the world do you think when you come back into your body? And also, how did you come back into your body?
oh, well, when I was leaving heaven, I remember I had to stand. I was standing in a circle, and we're in the circle were all of these archangels, these saints, ascended masters, and there were cherubs above, floating above, those in the circle around me. And I was sobbing, absolutely sobbing. I did not want to leave heaven. When I got to heaven, um, I just wanted to go home. I didn't know I was in heaven until I sat with God. Okay. So even after my life review, I was like, I got to get home. My son, he's waiting for me. What's going on with these doctors? Get the shit figured out. Like, I got to go. Right. I was worried about my son. And because he was only 4, he just turned 4. So I knew I had to be his mom. But then now I'm at a point where I'm like, I realize, oh, this is my home. This is my home. I don't want to leave here. And so they all raised their hands, and a white light, they infused it here in my soul. And literally, I got warmed by the love, and I stopped crying. It's like they had to give me even more love to come back. Just keep giving her love. And so when I left there, then I went and talked to Jesus. And then Saint Germain, my other guide, he was sitting under the olive tree in the shade. And Jesus, I looked at him and I said, I don't want to leave. And he said, Megan, I don't make the rules. I follow them like you do. And I was like, oh my God, that's right. Okay. So I had to leave. And then I was taking off my stole and my robe, and I was walking over to the shack to go put that in the laundry basket so I could walk back to my body. And I was walking down this dirt road, and all of a sudden, Prophet Muhammad comes walking out. And I thought, oh my gosh. So all of the cherubs, hundreds, there were so many cherubs around him. And I remember, like, we met. I was walking this way and he met me like this. And then we had our last conversation together. And I asked him, I said, I, I don't know if it's appropriate. I don't know anything about Islam. I know nothing. I grew up Catholic. I was an atheist. But I love you. And he goes, I love you too. And I asked if I could give him a hug. I said, if it's not appropriate, please. And so it was just so moving. But then I woke up in my hospital room, and I remember there was a nurse in the room. And the only thing that heaven allowed me to remember was that I just met Jesus. That's all I said to her. I woke up and I go, I just met Jesus. And she looked at me, and that's when I came back. I was in my body. I couldn't go back. And trust me, I was praying, take me back. I want to go back. But I couldn't. They wouldn't allow me back in.
So she obviously, you've told this nurse that you had this experience. Was this something you were super open with in the people in your life when you came back?
No, 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 no. I started to share. I was living in Branson, Missouri at the time.
Okay.
Years. Okay, you don't talk about Prophet Muhammad, Krishna, Kuan Yin. There's just a society there unto itself. It was not very warm to that. I'll just say that information that I had from heaven. I didn't feel comfortable talking about that. And I remember getting people's, eyes looking at me like, what are you talking about? But I saw Jesus and I was so excited. And I just wanted to tell everybody like how great it was in heaven because I didn't believe. And it's something that I could only talk about with my husband and my son. And then I had a girlfriend and I would talk about it with her, and that was pretty much it. I couldn't say anything because my NDE was in June. This June, it'll be 18 years. So 18 years ago, I don't know how many NDEs there were. I didn't follow anything. I still don't, but like I don't know if it was common. I didn't know who Raymond Moody was. I don't even know if I'd heard his name by then. I had no idea. So I've heard of his name now, but
Of course.
yeah.
So Megan, this experience completely changed you. And you now are on this mission of love. So what is your biggest takeaway from this near-death experience that you think that people are meant to know?
Well, love is the answer, and love is the superpower. Love is the most powerful energy that exists. When you are looking at the news, when you are looking at whatever it is that you're reading, and you're not seeing love, don't let that deter you from stepping forward and trying to make a difference to bring people to the awareness that love can exist because it does, and that's how we were all created, and that it should exist and be the primary foundation and structure for everyone. Because if we didn't, let's put it this way, we've got wars going on in the world right now. We are on the brink, because I didn't talk about what Mozart and Bach said because I'm trying to be respectful of your time. But there was a point where
Megan, I got all the time to hear about this because I think these are important messages. So whatever you need to share, you can share.
okay, thank you. Then I will back up here.
Okay, let's do it.
I will say I was brought into temple another time where I was sitting at God's table and it was Bach and Mozart. And I thought, okay. And I'm sitting between them. This time I was sitting on the other side of the table and it was just the three of us at the table in temple. And I remember they started telling me, okay, there are things that are going there. Your world is trying to make things extinct right now. And they said, think about Latin. I took Latin as a kid. It was so many years ago, but it is extinct. And they said they are trying to take away the currencies in the world. They're trying to take religions away. This was almost 18 years ago, they were telling me this, okay? And they said to me, what the world is trying to do on Earth is make one world coin. So they said, you need to start saving coins. You need to start saving food. You need to start saving seeds and plant a garden. And I'm like, what? Okay, so I planted a garden immediately. I I was like on that coin thing, I'm like, well, I don't get it. And that was a downfall. And I'll tell you something, just because you don't understand it in that moment doesn't mean that eventually it's gonna like be revealed to you and that you're gonna go, oh, I get it. I got it. And so when COVID happened and I had a store in Sedona, I went to the bank to go get coins. And there was a sign on the bank door and it said, unless you're a business owner, we're not giving coins out. We have a shortage of coins going on. And I went, oh my God, it's here. So every penny, hang on to it. I mean, look, do what you will, but I'm giving the information out because heaven gave it to me to give to everybody. So heaven wants to protect everyone, right? Everyone. Greed has taken over. Complacency has destroyed our world. That's what is brought us to this point. And that came from Archangel Michael last year in a meditation that I had. So he's right. We wouldn't be in this position if people we're not directly affected, as God said. So we're all being directly affected now. And this is how it's been repeat after repeat over thousands of years. This is why Jesus showed me the Native Americans in the 1100s, then World War II, then the Civil Rights Movement, because people started to correct themselves to get through it. And then it kind of just fizzles out. Everything just kind of fizzles out. Oh, yeah, we're fine. Or whatever they're thinking. I don't know. But the point is that should never fizzle. That should never fizzle. These are real things that happened in our world that should never happen again, but they're going to keep happening. And I'll tell you why I say this. They're going to keep happening unless humanity starts to understand the structure of love. So this is a book that I've just worked on, that I'm publishing soon this year. And there's a new book that I'm involved in as one of the co-authors called The Ways to God. And so I write in there about love and the structure of love and what it is. So I'll share if you want, but before I share that, I'm so nervous about sharing this because it seems like, oh, Megan, I don't know what anybody's thinking. I'm just thinking for myself what someone's little mind thought bubble could be, that, well, that's a lot of, hardcore stuff that you had to witness there in heaven. Why was heaven so intense? Well, I was being assigned a mission, literally a mission from God. I was being assigned a mission from heaven. I'm here to speak for everybody that I met in heaven and to let their voice continue so that it never be forgotten. And what they want us to know is that history has been rewritten and rewritten and rewritten to benefit leaders throughout the world. And it's like, hello, why does this not bother you? This isn't the truth. So there was another thing that God told me, and I've never said this ever before, and I'm nervous about it because I don't want this to be misconstrued. I don't want this to be, some weird, I can't believe she just said that. This is so sacred, what I'm going to share with you, because I know when I go back to heaven, if God says, why did you not share that? My honest answer to him would be, because I was scared of how people would respond. So rather than go back to heaven right now, because they're not going to let me back anyway right now, I'm going to share it here. And one of the things that God called me aside in heaven, this was one of the other meetings with God, and he informed me. He said, there is a way that we keep love alive in the universe. And he said, I am assigning you to a quartet. And I'm thinking music, like a clarinet quartet or something like that. But that wasn't the case. And he informs me, he says, you are going to make love while you're here in heaven. And I remember I looked at God and I go, but I'm married on earth. I mean, isn't that cheating? And I'm kind of feeling confused because I'm sitting here with you and I grew up Catholic. So it's like all flooding in and I'm confused. Like, how am I supposed to feel right now? And he simply explained, he said, Megan, how do you think the universe keeps the frequency of love alive? He said, look, no one's going to be forced to partake in this. So this is not something that's forced upon anybody. I want everybody to know that this is so sacred and it's arranged by God so that love can be kept alive. And everything is private. Everything is private. So I was assigned to meet the first soul who was in human form. And I'd never done this before, right? So this is not something that I was like, what do you say, right? So anyway, it happened, and I felt like, wow, that was incredible, because it's not anything that I've ever felt on earth. And so I thought, okay, so I don't know how much time went by, but maybe it was like the equivalent of an Earth day, I'm guessing, because there's time in between. And so then God um, assigned me to the second person in the quartet. And so I met with this second individual, and he was very good looking. I remember that. I was like, wow. And I could feel, energy of love for sure from all of them. But I felt love. And I thought, wow, this is okay. I get to experience love. So I had one experience. And so I was curious now, like how this was going to feel. And it was amazing. And I thought, wow, okay. I mean, when that was complete, I thought, okay, well, there's another one, so whenever the time came again, whether it was like an Earth Day later or whatever, um, I met God, assigned me to the third soul. And oh my God, I have never felt love like that ever. And this is what I wish for everybody, to feel a love that's heavenly, and that there are no words to describe how deeply it connects to your soul. And I remember after that third experience, and I had to meet with God again, and so I'm the fourth, right, in the quartet. So I had to be rotated back to the first individual when that time came, and God was telling me, and I said, no, 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 I will not go back to that first one. I don't want to touch the second one again. I want the third one. And that's what I want to feel. That's what I need here. And he was like, okay. And if anybody is curious, like how it is that I could feel so comfortable in speaking like this to God, I just was. There wasn't, I knew who was in charge. I wasn't in charge, but I was given an understanding for the first time in heaven that my feelings were valuable, and that what I felt I needed to share in order for me to receive the growth that I was supposed to receive in that moment. It was necessary for me to share where I really wanted to put my energy. I didn't want to feel like, oh, well, I have to. No offense to that soul. No offense. But that was not and God knew it. I swear God had to have known that, because that's why he assigned me to the third, so that I could keep. And then I was like, yep, that's who I want. That's perfect. So I've never shared that with anybody. And I'm sharing this now because I know I had to share that. And I don't ever want this, to be misunderstood as anything less than sacred, because it still is, and love is kept alive in that way as well. And what I experienced in heaven can be had here on earth, but we all need to have this instructional of love and what love is. So love is, the L in love stands for light, and the light is your soul. The O stands for organic. So there are no two fingerprints alike. There are no two souls alike. So when we're born in on this planet, we are fresh. We are not going to be like anybody else. And that's not why we're here. The V in love stands for voice. So the moment that we speak, the moment of our thoughts inception, that's when the voice starts, when we're thinking. And you want to be really conscious about what you're thinking, because Archangel Michael told me in a meditation, actually, they woke me up. This was not in the meditation. Last year, they woke me up in the morning and I heard him say, there's not enough room in the universe for the negativity. So we keep the negativity in you. We'll let love out of your body, but we won't let negative out. So keep that in mind. That message, again, that wasn't just for me. And I was like, wow, that is so extraordinarily powerful. Then the E in love stands for echo. So energetically, what you say to yourself, what you say to another, what you think about another, that echo is rippling inward or outward, and it doesn't stop. And if it's negative, it can be corrected, because love can correct anything. Evil can be destroyed, but love can never be destroyed. Evil,
Wow.
evil can be destroyed, and it's being destroyed. But we have to, as a collective, move forward now for the rest of our lives and teach this for generations to come. Here are the rules. Love, Love. And I don't care what religion you are, let's have love as the new religion.
I love that. Okay. Oh, well, first of all, thank you for feeling comfortable enough here to share that. I know that that was a really big deal. We actually talked about this before we came on air, and you were really conflicted of whether you wanted to share. And I felt honored that you shared it with me, because having been on the other side, there is nothing but love. And there wouldn't be anything that wasn't sacred in this way. We have all these human rules and constraints that bind us here, but on the other side, we do not. So my first question about this quartet that you were a part of is, did you have a recognition, like on a soul level, of who these beings were when you met them?
Yes, because I didn't know who they were before I got to heaven, but I met them at God's table. I will say that. That
Okay.
I said that. Oh my God.
Okay.
So yes, they were
Okay.
they were extraordinarily powerful in love. I will
Were,
say
were any of them incarnated also in this realm right now as you are as Megan Brown?
yes.
Have you encountered, we didn't talk about any of this stuff, sorry, like all these questions. Have you encountered any of them in the physical since you've been back from this near-death experience 18 years ago?
Yes. When I channel for people, some people are curious if it, like, okay, what's my purpose? Who is my soul? Like, is there something to the soul? People ask questions, and I say, oh, of course, we're all a soul. So we're all a soul that is love, pure love. Okay. So the creator is always a part of our soul. So actually, it's like being two souls in one. So the creator is always part of the soul. Whoever signs up, whatever archangel, angel, saint, or ascended master says, okay, yep, I'll put my soul in there. And then they choose the body that they're going to go in, and they're going to work through this family, through this part of the country, this part of Earth, whatever, planet they're on. This is what they do. And we are all born as we are here to be a representative of heaven. And I know this. I mean, I flat out know this now. But we are all born as an angel, an archangel, a saint or an ascended master, or God or goddess, because they split themselves off and they go into somebody's soul as well as a human. And, you know, maybe that's a little difficult to hear, but I wasn't attached to the Catholic Church when I got to heaven. I'd been 18 years an atheist. So that wasn't, I didn't have any connection. Like I had a connection, but like it didn't shock me that there was something more to the soul, something like that. Like when I said to God, I go, one of the questions I asked him, I don't know if I mentioned this in the first one, but I said, God, there's hundreds of thousands of people dying right now. How is it that you're here with me? And he said, I split myself up. So that's what they do. And we are all a combination of either one of those and the creator.
So in this coming back and having these 18 years of experience, you had a recognition of one of those quartets or multiples of them when you came back into this earthly incarnation?
I'm trying to remember if I've seen one of them. Two of them I have. Yes, in human form. Because they asked who their soul was. And sometimes I'll say to people, depending on where they're at, I'm respectful of where everybody's at when they connect with me. But I mean, when people ask to get a reading with me, it's because, look, I don't hide. I'm channeling heaven. That's it. I hear people say, oh, I connect to this realm and blah, blah, blah. Okay. Well, you know what? I only connect to heaven, and that's all I trust because that is pure love. That's it. I'm not knocking any aliens. Okay. I'm not, because I met them there, but they're not the heaven. They're love. They are absolute love. Oh my goodness. But that's not who I'm connecting with. It's God. It's our creator. It's heaven. Or the archangels step in, or Moses. I mean, he's come up 2 or 3 times recently. And it's all been around introducing water and the significance of water in our human life, which I know that goes on, but they woke me up and they told me about water in such a way that was so profound, and it all connects back to us.
Do you want to share what they connected you to understand about water?
Okay. Okay, so, and this is in my book, by the way. So they woke me up. Happened to be a new moon, which was interesting. I was in Hawaii with my son, and um, it was December 30th. And I woke up, I was woken up in the middle of the night, and I'd been hiking. I'd been to the volcano hiking. I'd been to the beaches with my son. I mean, we're driving all over the island, the big island. And I was exhausted. So there's nothing that could have woken me up. But in the middle of the night, I hear in a male voice, Romo. And my eyes just went open, and I thought, okay, I better write this down. So I wrote it down. And then I got up, I had to go to the bathroom, and I thought, okay, well, I get back into bed. And then I said to heaven, I go, well, what does Romu mean? And they said, so clear, they said, advancement of water.
Hmm.
And I said, okay, all right. So I wrote that down. And then I didn't meditate because we were just going, going, going. And when I got back, it was my grandfather's, what would have been my grandfather's 100 and something birthday, I don't know, but it was January 17th. And well, that also happens to be Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And so this was really interesting because it was my grandfather's birthday, and my grandfather and I used to spend a lot of time around water when I was with him, and we'd go fishing out on sailboats and stuff. So I'm woken up again, same male voice, and it said Kibichi. And I wrote it down, and I thought, okay, I wrote it down. And then I thought, okay, well, just help me go back to sleep. But I said, well, okay, what does Kibichi mean? And they said, to have and to hold your life together. And I thought, well, that's profound. Okay, so I'm writing that down. All right. So I'll deal with it when I wake up. And then a few minutes goes by, and I'm still laying there trying to go back to sleep. And I hear the word atonement. And I thought, well, that's so Catholic. I better write that one down because I know that's like a religious connotation or what I think, right? Unbelievable. So then I started getting these, they'd give me messages in dream form after that, around water and the significance of water and the fish. And they would give me, they brought a mermaid to me one night. I mean, this was a turtle. There was a turtle. I couldn't believe what was happening. And then I shared with a couple of people that I know, and they said, I had a water dream, or so and so just had a water dream and was told to move in front of the creek or the river, or wherever they were, somewhere in the Midwest. And I said, are you serious? Then another woman reached out to me and said, I had this dream 2 nights ago you were in, and it was about water, and there was a crown. And she goes, but it was me, and there was a crown or a halo, um, and the water was significant. And I was asking in it, in the dream, what does this mean? And she said, what I heard was, this is you. And so she shared that with me, and I went, oh my God, I get it. I totally get it. What's happening here? So, water is so incredibly sacred, and they've given me so much information. We need to start praying for the water. We need to start taking care of the oceans. We need to uh look, I don't care if you're working for the government or not, and you're not being paid to pick shit up out of the water, get it out. Because guess what? Here's something that humans have in commonality with the ocean, water. My blood disease is TTPHUS. There's no mistake that they poisoned my blood, heaven, poisoned my blood. And I didn't realize this until I started getting the water messages, because the blood is water. Okay. Plasma, water, hello. We're water and hydrogen. And guess what the universe is? Water and hydrogen. Oh, it gets smaller and smaller. But the reason that they showed me the mermaid was she was upset, and she was letting me know, because I was watching her on the ocean was calm, but she was so sad. She was letting me know telepathically that this is our world is being destroyed. Our world is being destroyed, and you need us, and you don't realize that. Oh my God. I I started to cry. I don't cry, by the way. Some people have issue with that. Like, she doesn't cry talking about God or all of them. I don't cry about that. What makes me want to cry is what I'm watching happening here. I'm happy there. I'm happy in heaven.
Right. You're in the state of love and bliss.
And
Right.
yes, and it was absolutely a humbling experience on so many levels. But what I started to cry about was the water.
Mm.
And that, not, I wasn't sobbing. I don't sob really. I felt it so deeply, and how powerful the message is to start holding sacred the water. And atonement has everything to do with religions and philosophies of the world, truly, because it does apply. And that's also a unifying factor when you think about it, because Christians baptize right from the very beginning, Catholics baptize. The Muslims wash their hands. The water is sacred. They're always clean before they pray. And then I started reading other water things. I can't remember right now. There's something around Buddha. And I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a religious whatever. So I don't remember all this stuff, but I do remember those three. And I thought, oh my God, this is so perfect. So if anything, if people could just look at water as being their religion and start treating the water as their religion, as in love, and that is their go-to, that's your religion right there. Water. Water is love. Water is love. And that gets into a whole other thing. So
They're going to have to get the book if they want to know more about it.
yes, and yeah, and so these are the things like I'm teaching in my retreats, and so it's like I want to help connect people to heaven and channel messages, but I also want it to get out bigger and water. I want that to become like, oh, I want to like I'm responsible. We all have a responsibility, Lori,
Yeah, for sure.
here to get us back on track of heaven. We can be heaven here. We can be heaven here.
I think that that's probably the best possible message that we can leave this discussion with. We can be heaven here. Megan, thank you so, so much. I'm sure that people that are watching are going to want to connect with you. So tell us again where they can find you, how they can work with you, your retreats, your book, all of it.
Well, it's all in conversationswithmegan.com. That's my website. And I have my retreats posted. I just started sending out a newsletter because I realized that, I've got to get messages of love out differently. And I'm sharing, I mean, it's a buildup. I just started doing a YouTube thing because I thought, okay, well, I'm going to talk about each one of these individual things. There's so many things I learned in heaven. So I'm going to share them on YouTube.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And is that also Conversations with Megan, the YouTube?
No, it's Megan Brown.
Okay.
And it's U, lowercase u, like a dash, lowercase u, 3x, lowercase x, I think. I don't have it memorized, but
It's okay. I'll find it and I'll put it down in the show description. So don't worry about it.
okay.
It'll be easy to find.
You'll hear some stories on there. So
Wow. Well, Megan, thank you so much for coming back. We got to spend almost 3 hours together having this discussion about your near-death experience, and I feel like we only scratched the surface. I know there's so much more detail to it. So thank you so much for what you are doing to help wake up the collective. Thank you for infusing this world with the love. It is so greatly needed right now.
thank you for what you're doing and giving us NDEers the platform to speak our experiences to help others, hopefully.
This feeds my soul. So my absolute pleasure. And of course, we wouldn't be anywhere without everybody who is watching. So thank you everybody for watching. One of the most popular videos on my channel is around signs and synchronicities. And I thought it'd be fun to share the experience that Megan and I had during the recording of this part 2 of her NDE interview when she was in heaven on the other side, and she had an experience where she went to a stadium and she ran into the entertainer, Terry Kath. He was the lead guitarist of the band Chicago. And I had an incredible conversation with her off camera at the end after that interview because of a synchronicity that had happened between the two of us. When I originally scheduled this interview with Megan, we ran out of time while she was telling her near-death experience, and her story is so detailed that we scheduled part 2, which she scheduled for maybe 2 or 3 days after the original interview. But she realized on the day of the interview that she had double booked herself and she had to reschedule. But by then, my calendar was super full and we had to wait, I think, 3 weeks to come back together. So the day before Megan's interview, I looked at my phone calendar and I noticed that it was one of my friend's birthdays. And I made a mental note that the next day I needed to reach out to her and wish her happy birthday. So it was the next day, and Megan and I were in the middle of our NDE, and she was explaining that she had met Terry Kath on the other side. What she didn't share is many years ago, I would post these paintings that I painted on a website called Soul Heart Art. I had thousands of followers over many years, and this woman reached out to me and told me that my passed away loved one, Mark, who was the lead guitarist of the band Starship, she had in common a lead guitarist of a band that she was connected to. And we wound up having a phone call where she told me this incredible story, which was that this man had been coming to her in her dreams and she didn't know who he was, telling her that she needed to leave her relationship because it was abusive. And then one day while her kids were outside playing, she heard a commotion and she opened the door, and this man was there in spirit and then fully manifested, and she recognized this man from her dreams. And he told her she needed to leave her marriage, which she ultimately did. And it turned out that this man was Terry Kath. She had met him one time when she was younger, but had never really had any significant encounters with him and didn't know him in this lifetime. But he has continued for many, many years to be a spirit guide on the other side who sends her signs and synchronicities all the time. It was very unusual that this day happened to her on May 13th, and everything in her life is around these numbers 0513. And one of the crazy connections we have, in addition to having a guitar love on the other side, is that that date happens to be my birthday. And when I met her, I was living in Chicago. So we have all of these synchronicities around the band Chicago, those numbers which have been continued to be very prominent in her life. And then fast forward to Megan's interview. That day that I had the interview is my friend's birthday. And what are the chances that a story would be told about her passed away connection, Terry Kath, on her birthday, for me to call her and give her a message from Terry? Because ultimately that's what spirits do. They know what's going on in our lives, and they will pull out all of the stops to conspire to send us a message. So when I got done with the interview with Megan, I called my friend to wish her a happy birthday. Normally she's in bed early, and she wasn't. It was 10:30 at night her time, and she was still awake, and I was able to deliver a very special birthday message shout out, because I know that that's what that was. So I wanted to share that with you. Megan and I were just shaking our heads at all of the synchronicities, because originally I was supposed to talk to Megan like the day after, and it got canceled, and she couldn't get on my calendar until that day. And so one of the things I've really come to know in doing all these interviews and having this life that is very magical is that in hindsight, when you look back at things, they unfold perfectly. So our lives are unfolding perfectly. And while I'm saying this, there's a hummingbird like hovering in my window, like, come on. So anyway, that's my story, and I wanted to share it with you. I would love to hear from you in the comments. You guys are experiencing signs and synchronicities. I am so open to hearing about them from you. I love them. And one of the things I always say is that your signs and synchronicities confirm my signs and synchronicities, and vice versa. So again, thank you so much for watching. Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.